The snow fell thick and relentless across the Montana Rockies as December 1875 painted the world white. Sarah Mitchell's fingers had long stopped feeling the cold, stopped feeling anything at all. She lay in a shallow ravine, her torn dress doing nothing against the brutal wind, her mind drifting somewhere between consciousness and the merciful darkness that kept calling her name. Blood from the gash on her temple had frozen against her cheek. She'd been running for 2 days since escaping her uncle's wagon train, since the moment she'd overheard his plan to sell her to a mining camp brothel to pay his gambling debts. Better to die free in the snow than live as property. Her trembling hand reached for the small silver locket around her neck, the only thing left from her mother. Maybe she could trade it for warmth, for one more day, but there was nothing here but endless white and the silence of her own slowing heartbeat. Before we continue with Sarah's story, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. It truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments. The barking started as a distant echo, then grew louder. Sarah's eyes cracked open to see a massive dog, some mix of wolf and shepherd, standing above her, its breath creating clouds in the frozen air. The animal didn't growl or bare its teeth. Instead, it let out a long, mournful howl that echoed across the mountains. "Ghost! Where'd you go, boy?" The voice was deep, rough as gravel, carrying across the snow. Sarah tried to speak, but her lips wouldn't form words. The dog, Ghost, barked again, insistent, then gently took the hem of her dress in his teeth and tugged. The man who appeared through the snowfall looked like he'd been carved from the mountain itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard dusted with ice and dark eyes that had seen too much. He wore furs and leather, a rifle slung across his back. He froze when he saw her, and something flickered across his face. Pain, recognition, terror. "No," he whispered, dropping to his knees beside her. "Not again. God, not again." His hands were gentle as they touched her face, checking for life. "Can you hear me?" Sarah managed the smallest nod. "I'm getting you out of here." He shrugged off his heavy fur coat and wrapped it around her, the warmth shocking against her frozen skin. When he lifted her, she weighed nothing in his arms. "Hold on! Just hold on!" Through her fading vision, she saw his jaw clenched tight, saw the way his hands shook as he carried her. Ghost ran ahead, leading them through the snow. The cabin appeared like a mirage. Solid logs, smoke curling from a stone chimney. Inside was warmth, blessed warmth, and the smell of wood smoke and coffee. He laid her on a bed covered in furs and blankets, then immediately stoked the fire higher. "I need to check your injuries," he said, his voice strained. "I won't hurt you. I swear to God, I won't hurt you." Sarah's eyes met his, and she saw it clearly. This man had held someone dying before. Recently. The grief was raw on his face. He worked with practiced efficiency, warming water, cleaning the wound on her head, checking her frost-bitten fingers and toes. His hands were steady now, focused on the task, but she heard him muttering under his breath, "Not again! You're going to live! You're going to live!" When he'd done all he could, he sat in a chair beside the bed, his head in his hands. Ghost lay on the floor between them, whining softly. "Who are you?" Sarah finally managed to whisper. He looked up and she saw tears frozen in his beard. "Name's Marcus Webb. That's Ghost. This is my home. You're safe here." "Why? Why did you say not again?" His jaw worked for a moment before he answered. 3 months ago, my wife Emma, Ghost found her too, in the snow. She'd been thrown from her horse, broke her back. I carried her home just like I carried you. She died in that bed the next morning, holding my hand. The raw grief in his voice made Sarah's chest ache. "I'm sorry. I couldn't save her." His voice broke. "I couldn't save my Emma, but I'll be damned if I lose another woman to this mountain. You hear me? You're going to live." Over the next days, Sarah learned the rhythm of Marcus Webb's solitary existence. He'd been a fur trapper for 15 years. Had met Emma when he'd saved her from a bear attack 5 years ago. They'd married within a month, spent every day together, until that awful afternoon in September. "I should have been with her," he said one evening, sitting by the fire while Sarah rested. "Should have gone riding with her, but I was checking the traps." "You couldn't have known," Sarah said softly. He looked at her with those dark, haunted eyes. "That's what everyone says. Doesn't make it true." She told him her own story, about her parents' death from cholera, about her uncle taking her in and then betraying her, about running into the snow, preferring death to dishonor. "You're not property," Marcus said fiercely. "You're a person, a brave one." "I don't feel brave. I feel broken. Broken things can heal. Emma taught me that." He paused. "Before the accident, before I met her, I was angry, violent, got into fights, killed men who didn't need killing. She saw something in me worth saving, said I wasn't broken, just wounded." As Sarah's strength returned, she began helping around the cabin. Marcus was initially resistant, but she insisted. "I won't be a burden," she said firmly. "Teach me to be useful here." So he did. He taught her to cook over the fire, to tan hides, to read the weather in the clouds. He was patient, explaining everything twice if needed, never raising his voice. One morning, he brought in a rabbit he'd trapped. "Time you learned to shoot," he said. "Mountain lion's been prowling around. You need to protect yourself when I'm gone." The rifle was heavy in her hands, but Marcus stood behind her, his chest against her back, his arms guiding hers. "Breathe slow," he murmured near her ear. "Feel your heartbeat. Between beats, that's when you fire." She was acutely aware of his warmth, his strength, the way his breath stirred her hair. When she hit the target, a mark on a distant tree, he stepped back quickly, as if he'd just realized how close they were. "Good shot," he said gruffly, then walked away. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She heard Marcus moving around the cabin and found him sitting by the fire, Emma's shawl in his hands. "I betrayed her today," he said without looking up. "Standing close to you, feeling. I betrayed her memory." Sarah sat beside him. "Emma wouldn't want you to grieve forever." "How do you know what she'd want?" "Because she loved you enough to see the good in you. That kind of woman wouldn't want you to be alone and miserable." He finally looked at her, his eyes wet. "I made her a promise. The morning she died, while she was still breathing, she made me promise to never love again. Said she couldn't bear the thought of another woman in our home, in our bed. I promised. How do I break a promise to a dying woman?" Sarah's heart broke for him. Maybe she was scared. People say things when they're scared. She meant it. Emma always meant what she said. He stood abruptly. "You should sleep. We've got work tomorrow." Winter deepened, and the cabin became a world unto itself. Marcus taught Sarah to track animals in snow, to identify edible plants, to start fire with flint. She grew stronger, her frostbite healed, but she noticed Marcus maintaining careful distance between them. Yet there were moments, his hand steadying her when she slipped on ice, the way his eyes followed her across the room. The night she woke, screaming from a nightmare about her uncle, and found Marcus beside her bed, his hand on her shoulder. "You're safe," he kept saying. "I'm here. You're safe." She grabbed his hand without thinking, and they stayed that way until dawn, neither speaking, just holding on. One afternoon in January, while Marcus was checking his trap lines, Sarah found Emma's diary in a trunk. She knew she shouldn't read it, but something compelled her to open it. The final entry made her gasp. "I fear I won't survive this. The pain is unbearable. I made Marcus promise not to love again, but it was cruel of me. I was jealous even in death. If any woman reads this, If Marcus brings someone to our home, please know I was wrong. I loved him too much to share him. But I loved him too little to want his happiness more than my pride. If you make him smile again, if you chase away the darkness I'll leave behind, then you're the woman I should have been." Sarah was still crying when Marcus returned, snow in his hair. He saw the diary, and his face went pale. "You had no right. She released you from that promise," Sarah interrupted, showing him the entry. "She released you, Marcus." He read it once, twice, his hands shaking. Then he looked at her with such raw longing it took her breath away. "Even if she did," he said hoarsely, "I can't. Every time I look at you, I remember finding you in the snow like I found her. I remember carrying you like I carried her. I'm terrified that if I love you, I'll lose you too." "You might," Sarah said, stepping closer. "Or you might not. But Marcus, we're already lost if we don't try." "I see a woman worth saving," he whispered, echoing words Emma had once said to him. "But what if I can't? You already did. You saved me from the snow, from despair, from believing I was worthless. Let me save you from grief." He cupped her face with trembling hands. "Go slow," he whispered. "This hurts." No, she breathed. "I'll die before I hurt you more." Their first kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of tears and hope. Ghost whined happily from his place by the fire. Over the following weeks they built something new, not a replacement for what Marcus had lost, but something entirely their own. Sarah learned that Marcus had scars across his back from a grizzly attack, that he carved small animals from wood when he couldn't sleep, that he sang old Irish songs his mother taught him. He learned that Sarah was terrified of the dark, that she'd once wanted to be a teacher, that she laughed like music when Ghost did something foolish. Their first night together was gentle, reverent. Marcus worshipped every inch of her as if she were precious, and she held him as he wept, for Emma, for lost time, for the fear of loving again. "Together," he whispered against her skin, "we face everything together." "Together," she agreed. But peace never lasted long in the mountains. In early March, a group of men arrived at the cabin, 5 rough-looking prospectors led by a heavy-set man with cold eyes. "You Marcus Webb?" the leader asked. "I am." "State your business." "I'm Chester Mitchell. That's my niece you got in there." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face draining of color. "Uncle Chester." "Time to come home, girl. Got a buyer waiting who paid good money for you." Marcus stepped between them, his hand on his rifle. "The lady isn't going anywhere." Chester smiled coldly. "Lady? She's my property, signed over by her parents when they died. Legal and proper. Now step aside, mountain man, before someone gets hurt." "No." Marcus's voice was steel. "She's under my protection. Leave now, while you can still walk." Chester gestured and his men drew weapons. Marcus didn't flinch. "I've killed more men than you've got here," Marcus said quietly, "including in the war. I don't want to kill again, but I will paint this snow red before I let you take her." "Marcus, don't," Sarah said. "I'll go. I won't let them hurt you." He looked back at her, his eyes fierce with love. "No. I lost Emma. I won't lose you too. Not while I'm breathing." The standoff might have ended in bloodshed, but Ghost suddenly snarled, not at the men, but toward the tree line. A moment later, a dozen Blackfoot warriors emerged from the forest, led by a tall man Marcus clearly recognized. "Running Bear," Marcus said, relaxing slightly. "You're far from home." The Blackfoot leader gestured toward Chester's men. "These men hunted on our winter grounds, killed sacred white buffalo. We followed to seek justice." Chester paled. "We didn't know. Ignorance doesn't excuse sacrilege." Running Bear looked at Marcus. "You saved my son from fever last winter. I repay debt. Are these men your enemies?" Marcus considered. The leader tried to take my woman by force, claims ownership of her like she's a horse. Running Bear's face hardened. No person is property. We learned this from watching white men. Strange they don't follow their own wisdom. He turned to Chester. Leave, now. If you return, you hunt on our lands without permission. That means death. Chester and his men fled, stumbling through the snow in their panic. Running Bear nodded to Marcus. We are even now, friend. May your woman bring you peace. After the warriors vanished back into the forest, Sarah collapsed against Marcus, shaking. It's over, he murmured, holding her tight. You're safe. You're free. Because of you. Because of us. Together, remember. That night by the fire, Marcus pulled out a small wooden box. This was my mother's, he said, showing her a simple gold band. Emma never wanted it, said it reminded me of loss, but maybe it can mean something new. He knelt before her. Sarah Mitchell, I've been dead inside since September. You brought me back to life. Will you marry me? Will you build a life here with me in this mountain that tried to kill us both? She pulled him up and kissed him. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They married in the spring, with Running Bear's tribe as witnesses. Sarah wore a dress she'd sewn from deer hide, decorated with beads the Blackfoot women had gifted her. Marcus wore his clean buckskins and braided a wildflower into his beard, making her laugh. The medicine man blessed them in Blackfoot, then in English. You have both known death. Now you choose life. Walk the path together. As seasons turned, Sarah and Marcus built a life that honored the past while embracing the future. They added a room to the cabin, started a small garden, took in a young orphan boy from Fort Benton who reminded Marcus of himself. On the anniversary of Emma's death, they visited her grave together. Marcus placed flowers on the stone, then took Sarah's hand. Thank you, he whispered, to Emma, to Sarah, to the mountain that had taken everything and given everything back. Sarah squeezed his hand. Together. Always together. Ghost barked happily, chasing butterflies through the meadow grass, and for the first time in a long time, the mountain felt like home. Years later, when Sarah was heavy with their second child, she would tell their daughter the story of how Ghost found her in the snow, how a broken man and a desperate woman saved each other, how love could bloom even in the coldest winter. Daddy was sad. Little Emma, named for the woman who'd loved Marcus first, would ask. Very sad, Sarah would say. But sadness doesn't last forever, not if you're brave enough to love again. Marcus would overhear these conversations and pull Sarah close, kissing her temple where the scar from that frozen day still showed. Best thing Ghost ever brought home, he'd murmur. I don't know, she'd tease. He once brought home that raccoon. Second best thing, they'd laugh, and Ghost, older now, grey in his muzzle, would thump his tail, proud of himself. The mountain had tried to take Sarah Mitchell's life. Instead, it gave her a new one, better than anything she'd dared dream. And Marcus Webb, the grieving widower who'd thought he'd never love again, learned that the heart has infinite capacity. For loss, yes, but also for healing, for growth, for loving differently, but no less deeply. On warm summer evenings, they'd sit on the porch watching the sun paint the peaks gold and pink, their children playing in the yard, Ghost supervising with dignified patience. Do you ever regret it? Sarah would ask. The isolation, the hard life. Marcus would look at her, this woman who'd been dying in the snow, who'd fought her way back to life, who taught him that love wasn't betrayal but continuation, and smile. Not for a single moment. You're not just worth saving, Sarah. You're worth everything. And in the gathering dusk, with the mountain standing eternal witness, they'd sit together in the life they'd built from trauma and snow and the unwavering loyalty of a dog named Ghost. The peace they'd built, lasted through that first spring and summer, but autumn brought new challenges. Sarah woke one October morning to find Marcus standing at the window, his body rigid with tension. "What is it?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Smoke. From the valley. Too much smoke for cooking fires." Within an hour, Running Bear arrived with 3 warriors, their faces grim. "Fort Benson burns," he said. "White soldiers say Blackfoot attacked. We did not. But they come now with guns and anger, burning everything in their path. You must leave, friend. They will not care that you live peacefully." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at their cabin, the home they'd built together, the life they'd created. "We're not running." "Marcus," Sarah began. "No." His voice was firm but not harsh. "We run now. We run forever. This is our home. We defend it." Running Bear nodded with respect. "Then we defend together. The soldiers lie about my people. We will not let lies destroy good men." Over the next 2 days, they prepared. Marcus taught Sarah to reload rifles quickly, to shoot from cover, to stay calm under pressure. The Blackfoot warriors showed them how to create false trails, how to use the terrain for advantage. "I'm scared," Sarah admitted the night before the soldiers were expected to arrive. Marcus held her close. "So am I. But fear means you've got something worth protecting. And Sarah, you're worth every fight." The soldiers came at dawn, 30 men led by a young lieutenant who looked barely old enough to shave. They surrounded the cabin, rifles ready. "Marcus Webb!" the lieutenant called. "We have reports you're harboring hostile Indians." Marcus stepped out, his hands visible but his rifle within reach. Sarah stood in the doorway behind him, her own weapon loaded. "The only Indians here are friends," Marcus called back, "and the only hostile people I see are the ones pointing guns at my home." Fort Benson was attacked. 12 people died. "We have orders to clear the area of all Blackfoot." "The Blackfoot didn't attack your fort," Marcus said. "I know the tribes in these mountains. They don't raid in autumn. They prepare for winter. Someone's lying to you, Lieutenant, and people are dying for it." A grizzled sergeant behind the lieutenant spat tobacco juice. "Injun lover says we're liars. Maybe he helped plan the attack." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm saying someone wants you fighting the Blackfoot instead of looking for the real killers. Who benefits from a war, Lieutenant? Think about it." The lieutenant hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his young face. In that moment, Ghost began barking furiously, not at the soldiers, but toward the forest. A shot rang out. The lieutenant fell, blood blooming on his shoulder. Chaos erupted as more shots came from the tree line, not from the Blackfoot positions Marcus knew were there, but from the opposite direction. "It's a trap!" Marcus shouted. "Your men are being ambushed!" He grabbed Sarah and pulled her inside as bullets tore through the air. Through the window, he saw what the soldiers couldn't, men in civilian clothes, not Blackfoot, firing on both the soldiers and the cabin. "Chester?" Sarah breathed. "My uncle. He's come back." Marcus understood instantly. Chester had somehow orchestrated the fort attack, blamed the Blackfoot, and now planned to eliminate both the soldiers and Marcus in the confusion, claiming Sarah in the aftermath. "Running Bear!" Marcus shouted toward the forest. "East side! Civilians!" The Blackfoot warriors, who'd been holding fire, suddenly swept down on the actual attackers. The soldiers, realizing they'd been deceived, turned their weapons on Chester's men. The fight was brutal and quick. Chester tried to flee, but Ghost brought him down. The dog's teeth clamped on his leg until Marcus arrived. "You destroyed a fort," Marcus said, his voice cold. "Killed innocent people. Started a war. All for one woman?" Chester spat blood. "She's worth a fortune to certain men, more than you'd see in a lifetime, mountain man." "She's worth more than money," Marcus said. "And she's not yours to sell." The surviving soldiers, led by the wounded lieutenant, arrested Chester and his remaining men. The sergeant who'd called Marcus an Injun lover stood looking at the Blackfoot warriors who'd saved his life. I owe you an apology, he said gruffly to Running Bear. All of you. Running Bear simply nodded. Many men believe lies about my people. Few admit when they are wrong. You have honor, soldier. After the soldiers left with their prisoners, Marcus found Sarah sitting on their bed, shaking. He would have killed everyone, she whispered. All those people, just to get to me. Marcus knelt before her, taking her hands, but he didn't. We stopped him, together. I brought this to your door. The danger, the violence. No. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Chester brought this. Evil men make evil choices. You're not responsible for his sins. She threw her arms around him and cried. For the dead at Fort Benson, for the fear, for the relief. Marcus held her and promised silently that he'd spend his life making sure she never felt like property again. Winter arrived early that year, hard and fierce. The cabin was snowed in for weeks at a time, and Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Marcus was terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. What if something goes wrong? He asked one night, his hand on her barely showing belly. What if I lose you like I lost Emma? Emma died from an accident, Sarah said gently. Women have babies every day. I'm strong, Marcus. You made me strong. You were always strong. I just helped you remember it. As her belly grew, so did Marcus's protectiveness. He wouldn't let her do heavy work, insisted she rest constantly, checked on her 12 times a day. Marcus Webb, she finally said in exasperation one afternoon, I am growing a baby, not dying of plague. Let me live my life. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't lose you. She took his face in her hands. Then trust me. Trust that I know my body, that I'll tell you if something's wrong. I need you as my partner, not my jailer. He exhaled slowly and nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just scared. I know, so am I. But we're in this together, remember? Together, he agreed and kissed her. The baby came in early spring, during a thunderstorm that shook the cabin. Marcus had ridden to Fort Benson for supplies just that morning, and Sarah was alone except for Ghost when the contractions started. She tried to stay calm, remembering everything the Blackfoot women had taught her during their visits. She prepared the bed, boiled water, gathered clean cloths, but as the hours passed and the pain intensified, fear crept in. Please, she prayed, gripping the bedpost, please let Marcus come home. Please let this baby live. Ghost whined and paced, sensing her distress. Then, as another contraction hit, the dog suddenly bolted out the door Sarah had left cracked for air. Ghost, no! But he was gone, running into the storm. Sarah was alone. The next hours blurred into agony. She focused on breathing, on pushing when her body demanded it, on not screaming even though every fiber of her being wanted to. She thought of Marcus, of Emma's diary, of the woman she'd become since that day in the snow. I can do this, she said through gritted teeth. I'm not weak. I'm not helpless. I can do this. When the baby finally came, slipping into her shaking hands, Sarah sobbed with relief. A girl, small but perfect, with a cap of dark hair and lungs that worked beautifully, announcing her arrival to the mountain. Sarah cleaned her daughter with trembling hands, wrapped her in soft furs, and held her close. She'd done it. Alone, in a storm, she'd brought life into the world. That's when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats and Ghost's barking. Marcus burst through the door, soaked and wild-eyed, Ghost at his heels. Sarah, I'm sorry, the storm. Ghost found me on the trail and... He stopped, seeing her in bed with the baby. His face went through shock, terror, relief, and finally wonder. You did it alone, he whispered, approaching slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. I did it alone, she confirmed, exhausted but proud. Meet your daughter, Marcus. He took the baby with shaking hands, this mountain man who'd faced bears and bullets without flinching, and tears streamed down his face. She's perfect. You're perfect. I should have been here. You're here now. That's what matters. Sarah smiled tiredly. Ghost saved us both. Again. Marcus sat on the bed, cradling his daughter with one arm and pulling Sarah close with the other. What should we name her? Sarah looked at the tiny face, then at Marcus. Hope. Let's call her Hope. Because that's what she is. Proof that we can survive anything. Hope Webb, Marcus said, testing the name. I like it. He kissed Sarah's forehead. You're the strongest person I know. I learned from watching you survive grief, she said. We're survivors, you and me, and we're teaching her to be one too. Outside, the storm began to clear, and sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the wet world gold. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Hope grew into a wild, fearless child who followed her father everywhere and had her mother's determination. A son came 2 years later, Samuel, named for Marcus's father, and then another daughter they called Grace. The cabin expanded room by room as their family grew. Marcus taught all his children to track, to shoot, to respect the land and the Blackfoot people who'd become like family. Sarah taught them to read, to think for themselves, to see people as people, not property. One evening, when Hope was 10 years old, she asked the question Sarah had been expecting for years. Mama, why don't we ever go to town? Why don't we have neighbors? Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded for her to tell it. Because the world isn't always kind to people who are different, Sarah said carefully. Your father and I chose a different path than most. We respect the Blackfoot. We live in the mountains. We believe all people are equal. Some folks in town don't like that. That's stupid, Hope said bluntly. Marcus chuckled. It is stupid, but stupid people can be dangerous. That's why we're teaching you to be strong, to be smart, to defend yourselves and what you believe in. Like when you and Mama fought off those bad men, Samuel asked. The story had become family legend. Exactly like that, Sarah said. We didn't fight because we wanted to. We fought because we had to protect what we love. You three, this home, the life we've built. And Ghost, Grace added, patting the old dog's head. Especially Ghost, Marcus agreed with a grin. That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus and Sarah sat on their porch watching the stars. Ghost, ancient now and mostly grey, lay at their feet. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Ghost hadn't found you that day? Marcus asked. Every day, Sarah admitted, I'd be dead. Or worse, owned by some awful man in a mining camp. Instead, I'm here, with you, with our children, living free. You gave me a reason to live again, Marcus said. After Emma died, I was just going through motions, waiting to die myself. You reminded me that life is worth living even after loss. Sarah leaned into him. We saved each other. That's the truth of it. You saved me from the snow, I saved you from grief, and we keep saving each other every day. We choose this life together. Together, he murmured, the word that had become their promise. Always together. Below them in the valley, they could see lights from Fort Benson, growing year by year as more settlers arrived. The world was changing, pushing closer to their mountain sanctuary. But up here, surrounded by family and protected by the wild, they'd built something that couldn't be taken away. The next morning brought visitors, Running Bear, now an old man himself with his son and grandson. We come with news, Running Bear said gravely. The government makes new laws. They want all Blackfoot on reservations. They say our land is not ours anymore. Marcus's face darkened. That's wrong. This is your land. Has been for generations. What white men say is wrong does not matter to white men, Running Bear said with sad wisdom. But I come to ask favor. My grandson, Little Wolf. He is 8 winters, same as your Samuel. The soldiers take children to schools far away, beat the Indian out of them. I ask you, will you teach him? Here, in secret? Give him learning without losing his spirit. Sarah didn't hesitate. Of course. Bring him whenever you wish. He'll learn alongside our children. And so their family grew again. Little Wolf became a fixture in their home, and Sarah taught all 4 children together. Reading, writing, arithmetic, but also Blackfoot language and customs, so her own children would understand the culture that had helped save their parents. One afternoon, Sarah was teaching the children about the stars when Hope asked, "Mama, are we Indian or white?" "You're both," Sarah said, "and neither. You're mountain people. You belong to this land and to yourselves. Never let anyone put you in a box." "But what if they try?" Little Wolf asked quietly. Marcus, who'd been listening from the doorway, came in and knelt by the boy. "Then you do what Sarah and I did. You fight. Not always with fists or guns, but with your mind, your words, your refusal to be less than you are. You fight by surviving, by living well, by being proud of who you are." "And if that doesn't work," Samuel asked, "then you have family," Sarah said. "Each other, us, Running Bear's people. You're never alone in this fight." The children seemed satisfied with this answer, and they returned to their lessons. But that night Marcus held Sarah close and whispered, "The world's not going to let them be free like we are, not forever." "No," she agreed, "but we'll give them the tools to survive it. Strength, education, pride, love. That's all any parent can do. I wish I could give them more, a better world." "You're giving them the truth about this one. That's more valuable than pretty lies." Years turned as they always do. Ghost passed peacefully in his sleep, and they buried him on the hill overlooking the cabin where he'd lived his whole life as a hero. Hope and Samuel grew tall and capable. Grace became the best shot of all of them, a fact that made Marcus simultaneously proud and terrified. Little Wolf remained part of their family, even as Running Bear's people were forced onto reservations. Marcus and Sarah hid him when soldiers came looking, claimed he was their son, lied without hesitation to protect him. "Why do you risk so much for me?" Little Wolf asked once, when he was 15, and soldiers had come dangerously close to discovering the truth. "Because you're family," Sarah said simply, "and family protects family, no matter what." Hope, now 20, was courting a young teacher from Fort Benson, a man who didn't care that she'd been raised half wild in the mountains. Samuel wanted to be a doctor, learning everything he could from the fort's physician. Grace declared she'd be the first woman to lead a wagon train west. Their children were leaving, creating their own lives, and while it hurt, Marcus and Sarah understood this was how it should be. They'd raised them to be strong, independent, unafraid. Now they had to let them fly. On the 20th anniversary of the day Ghost found Sarah in the snow, Marcus and Sarah made the long walk to Emma's grave. They went every year, always together, always bringing flowers. "Do you think she'd be happy with how things turned out?" Sarah asked, studying the weathered headstone. Marcus considered. "I think she'd be glad I'm not alone, that I learned to love again. Emma's last gift to me was releasing me from that promise. I hope wherever she is, she knows I didn't waste it." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You gave me a life, Marcus, a real life, where I'm a person, not property, where I'm strong, not broken, where I matter." "You always mattered," he said. "Even dying in the snow, you mattered. I just helped you see it." They stood together in the mountain silence, honoring the past while celebrating the present. Two survivors who'd found each other in the worst moment of their lives and built something beautiful from the wreckage. 20 years, Sarah marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime." "It's been both," Marcus said. "Every day with you feels like a gift I don't deserve. We both deserve this. We fought for it, bled for it, chose it every single day." She turned to him. This man who'd been broken and healed, who'd taught her strength and learned gentleness. "I'd do it all again." The snow, the fear, the fighting, all of it, to end up right here with you. He kissed her, soft and deep, the way he had 1,000 times before, and would 1,000 times more. When they pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the mountain in shades of gold and pink. "Ready to go home?" Marcus asked. "Always," Sarah said, "as long as it's with you." They walked back to their cabin hand in hand, two people who'd nearly died, who'd fought their way to life, who'd built a family and a legacy in the wilderness. Behind them, Emma's grave stood peaceful in the gathering dusk. And if spirits existed, perhaps she smiled to see the happiness her release had made possible. The mountain had taken much from both of them, but it had also given them everything that mattered: each other, their children, a life lived on their own terms. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the pines and the stars blazed overhead, they knew they'd found something rare and precious. They'd found home. They'd found love. They'd found themselves. Together. Always together. The telegram arrived on a cold November morning in 1895, 20 years after Ghost had found Sarah in the snow. Hope, now married with a daughter of her own, brought it up the mountain trail, her face pale with worry. "Papa, Mama," she said, dismounting quickly. "It's from the territorial governor's office." Marcus took the telegram with steady hands, but Sarah saw the tension in his shoulders as he read. His jaw tightened, and he passed it to her without a word. "Marcus Webb, stop. You are hereby summoned to testify before the Indian Affairs Commission regarding illegal harboring of native persons. Stop. Failure to appear will result in arrest. Stop. Report to Helena within 10 days. Stop." "They know about Little Wolf," Sarah whispered. "Someone talked," Marcus said grimly. "Or someone finally put the pieces together. 20 years of hiding him in plain sight. And now this." Hope's voice shook. "What will you do?" Marcus looked at Sarah, and she saw the same fierce determination that had saved her life 2 decades ago. "We go to Helena, we tell the truth, and we fight." "They could arrest you both," Hope said. "Send Little Wolf to a boarding school, take everything." "Then they take everything," Sarah said firmly. "But we won't betray him. We won't pretend we regret saving him from that fate." Little Wolf, now 28 and working as a scout for the army, arrived at the cabin that evening. He'd received his own summons. "You should let me go alone," he said quietly. "Tell them I deceived you, that you didn't know I wasn't your son. I can protect you." "No." Marcus's voice was steel. "We did know. We chose it. We'd choose it again. You're our son in every way that matters, Wolf. Blood isn't the only thing that makes family." "But the law is wrong," Sarah interrupted. "It's always been wrong. Those boarding schools destroy children, strip away their language, their culture, their spirit. We couldn't let that happen to you. We won't apologize for it now." Little Wolf's eyes filled with tears. "You could lose everything." "We'd lose more if we lost you," Marcus said simply. The journey to Helena took 3 days through early snow. Samuel and Grace insisted on coming, presenting a united family front. As they rode, Marcus told Sarah about the fear churning in his gut. "I survived the war, survived the mountain, survived losing Emma," he said. "But this, if they take our home, if they separate our family, Sarah, I don't know if I can survive that." She reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. "Then we make sure they don't. We've fought before. We'll fight again." "We're not young anymore," he said. "I'm 53. My hands shake sometimes. I'm not the man who carried you out of the snow." "No, you're better. You're wiser, calmer, and you have 20 years of love making you stronger than any young man could be." She smiled. "Besides, I'm not the helpless girl dying in the snow either. I'm a mother, a teacher, a survivor. We're a team, Marcus. We always have been." Helena was bigger than they remembered, full of new buildings and railroad tracks. The hearing was held in a formal courthouse, packed with officials, lawyers, and curious onlookers. A stern judge presided, flanked by 3 Indian Affairs commissioners. The prosecutor was a young man with cold eyes and Eastern manners. "Mr. Webb, is it true you knowingly harbored a Blackfoot child in violation of federal education mandates?" Marcus stood tall. "It's true I raised Little Wolf as my son, despite knowing he was legally required to attend a government boarding school? Despite knowing those schools beat children for speaking their own language, despite knowing they die of disease and despair at 3 times the rate of children at home. Yes, despite all that, I kept him safe." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor's face reddened. "You admit to breaking federal law. I admit to doing what was right. Sometimes those aren't the same thing." "Mrs. Webb," the prosecutor turned to Sarah, "you're educated. You understand the law. Why would you participate in this crime?" Sarah stood, her voice clear and unwavering. "Because I know what it's like to be treated as property. My uncle tried to sell me to a brothel. I was told I had no choice, no rights, no value beyond what men decided I was worth. Little Wolf deserved better than to have his identity, his language, his soul stripped away because some faraway government decided his culture was worthless. The boarding schools provide education." "They provide trauma," Sarah interrupted. "I've taught 4 children, including Little Wolf, to read, write, calculate and think, but I also taught them to honor their heritage, whatever it might be. Education shouldn't require cultural death." Little Wolf was called next. He stood in his army uniform, medals earned from scouting for the same government now prosecuting his parents. "Mr. Little Wolf," the prosecutor said awkwardly, "you serve in the United States Army. Do you not see the contradiction in honoring your country while your adoptive parents broke its laws?" "I see no contradiction," Little Wolf said calmly. "Marcus and Sarah Webb saved my life and gave me the tools to serve my country. They didn't make me white or make me pretend to be white. They let me be both Blackfoot and American. The boarding schools wouldn't have done that. They'd have beaten the Blackfoot out of me and left nothing but a shell. How can you be certain of that?" Little Wolf's face hardened. "Because I've met the survivors. I've talked to men my age who went to those schools. They can't speak to their grandparents anymore. They forgot their own names. They learned to hate themselves." His voice rose with passion. "Marcus and Sarah Webb committed no crime. They committed mercy. And if mercy is illegal, then your laws are evil." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. During a recess, an elderly man in expensive clothes approached them. "Mr. and Mrs. Webb, my name is Theodore Blackstone. I'm an attorney from New York, and I'd like to offer my services." "Ah, we can't afford," Marcus began. "I'm not asking for payment," Blackstone interrupted. 20 years ago, my daughter ran away from an arranged marriage. I spent a fortune searching for her, angry that she'd defied me. She died of pneumonia before I found her. I learned too late that I'd been trying to treat her as property, not a person." He looked at Sarah. "Your testimony reminded me of what I did to my Elizabeth. Let me make amends by helping you." With Blackstone's help, they called witnesses. Running Bear, ancient but dignified, spoke of the Webb family's respect for his people. Samuel testified about learning alongside Little Wolf, about the education his mother provided. Grace described how her parents taught acceptance and strength in equal measure. Hope brought her 5-year-old daughter, who climbed onto the witness stand and said in a clear voice, "Uncle Wolf teaches me to track rabbits. He's nice. Why are you being mean to him?" The simplicity of her words struck harder than any legal argument. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. A Crow woman named Morning Star, who'd spent 10 years in a boarding school, addressed the court. "They cut my hair," she said quietly, "took my clothes, Gave me a new name, Mary. Beat me when I spoke Crow. My sister died there of influenza because they wouldn't let her go home to die with family. She was 8 years old and died alone, crying in English because she'd forgotten how to say mother in our language. She turned to look at little Wolf. This man still speaks Blackfoot, still knows his people's stories, still honors his grandfather's ways. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because two white people loved him more than they feared the government. If that's a crime, then this court is the criminal. The deliberation took 2 hours. When the judge returned, his face was unreadable. This court finds that while Mr. and Mrs. Webb technically violated federal education mandates, they did so in a manner that produced a productive citizen who maintains both his cultural heritage and his American identity. The judge paused. Furthermore, this court notes that the defendant, Little Wolf, is now an adult who has served his country with distinction. The question of his childhood education is therefore moot. Relief flooded through Sarah, but the judge wasn't finished. However, this court cannot simply ignore the law. Therefore, I am issuing a formal reprimand and a fine of $1 to be paid immediately. Marcus pulled a silver dollar from his pocket and placed it on the clerk's desk. The sound it made echoed through the silent courtroom. "Case dismissed," the judge said. Then, more quietly, he added, "And may God grant us wisdom to write better laws." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Marcus simply said, "We did what any parent would do. We protected our child. That's all." But as they prepared to leave Helena, Blackston pulled them aside. "You've won this battle, but the war isn't over. The government is expanding the reservation system, taking more land. Your mountain might not be safe much longer." "Then we'll fight that battle when it comes," Sarah said firmly. "We've survived everything else." The ride home was quiet but peaceful. As they crested the final ridge and saw their cabin below, smoke curling from the chimney where Grace had stayed to tend the fire, Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. "We almost lost it," he said softly. "Everything we built." "But we didn't," Sarah reminded him. "We stood together, we told the truth, and we survived. Again." That night, with all their children gathered around the fire, Hope with her daughter, Samuel with medical texts he was studying, Grace cleaning her rifle, and Little Wolf carving a small wooden horse, Marcus looked around and felt the weight of nearly dying, of loss, of fear, all fall away. "You know what I'm grateful for," he said suddenly. Everyone looked up. That dog, Ghost. If he hadn't found Sarah that day, if he hadn't been loyal and brave and stubborn, none of this exists. Not this family, not this love, not this life. "To Ghost," Little Wolf said, raising his coffee cup. "To Ghost," they all echoed. Later, lying in bed, Sarah asked Marcus something that had been bothering her. "Do you ever regret it? Not the children, but the fight. We could have had an easier life if we'd just followed the rules." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Emma and I followed the rules. We were careful, proper, did what society expected, and she still died. The rules didn't save her, didn't save anyone." He turned to face Sarah in the darkness, but breaking the rules, choosing love over law, choosing people over property, that saved you, saved me, saved Wolf, created this family. So no, I don't regret it, not for a second. Even if they'd sent us to prison. Even then, because I'd rather be a criminal who did right than a law-abiding man who did wrong. Sarah kissed him softly. "I love you, Marcus Webb. You stubborn, moral, impossible man. I love you, Sarah Webb. You fierce, unbreakable, extraordinary woman." They fell asleep holding hands, the way they had every night for 20 years, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but confident they'd face them together. The seasons turned, and the 20th century dawned with both promise and threat. The frontier was closing, railroads pushing deeper into wilderness, and the old ways were dying. But on their mountain, the Webb family held firm. Then came the spring of 1902, and with it a letter that would test them once more. It was from a lawyer in Boston, addressed to Sarah specifically. Her hands shook as she opened it. "What is it?" Marcus asked, seeing her face go pale. "It's about my parents," she whispered. "Their estate. Apparently my uncle never had legal guardianship. He forged documents. This lawyer has been searching for me for years. My parents left me everything, a house, investments, money. Marcus, I'm wealthy." The word felt foreign in her mouth. She'd been poor, been desperate, been dying in the snow. Wealth seemed like a concept from another life. "How much?" Marcus asked carefully. She scanned the letter. "Enough to buy half of Montana. Enough to never work again. Enough to—" She trailed off, seeing the look on his face. "Enough to leave," he finished quietly. "Marcus, no. You could go back east, live in comfort, have servants, fine dresses, society." His voice was carefully neutral, but she heard the fear underneath. "You could have the life you were supposed to have before all this." Sarah set the letter down and took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Marcus Webb, are you seriously suggesting I'd leave you, after everything? I'm saying you have a choice now, a real choice, not desperation or survival, but actual freedom to choose any life you want." "Then I choose this one," she said fiercely. "I choose you, this mountain, our family, this life we built from nothing. I don't want servants or society or any of it. I want you, Sarah. When Ghost found me dying in the snow, I had nothing. No future, no hope, no life. You gave me all of that. You think I'd trade it for money?" She was crying now, angry and hurt. "You're not a consolation prize, Marcus. You're not what I settled for. You're what I choose every single day, over everything else." He pulled her close, his own eyes wet. "I'm sorry, I know I'm not educated or refined. I'm just a rough mountain man who saved my life, who treated me with respect when I'd been treated as property, who built me a home and gave me children and loved me fiercely for 27 years. Marcus, you're everything." They held each other for a long time. And when they finally pulled apart, Marcus asked, "So what do you want to do with the money?" Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled. "I want to build a school, right here in the mountains, where children, white, Blackfoot, whatever they are, can learn without losing themselves, where they're taught to think, not obey, where education doesn't mean erasure." Marcus's face lit up. "A school. Our legacy," Sarah said. "Not just our children, but everyone's children. Teaching them the way we taught ours, with respect, with love, with the truth about the world and the tools to survive it. The authorities won't like it." "When have we ever cared what authorities like?" Sarah laughed. "Besides, with my money we can hire lawyers. Fight the battles in court before they reach our door." Over the next year, they built the school, a large log building with windows facing east to catch the morning sun, with desks and books and maps. They hired 2 teachers from back east, young idealists who believed in their vision, and they opened the doors to anyone who wanted to learn. Children came from Fort Benson, from the Blackfoot Reservation, from homesteads scattered across the territory. They learned reading, writing, mathematics, but also tracking, survival skills, Blackfoot language, and most importantly, how to think for themselves. The authorities complained, but Sarah's lawyers were better. When the government tried to shut them down, citing education standards, Sarah pointed out her school outperformed the boarding schools in every measurable way. When they tried to claim she was teaching sedition, she invited inspectors to sit in on classes and prove it. The school became famous, written about in Eastern newspapers as an experiment in integrated education and a model for progressive learning. Sarah hated the attention, but used it to protect what they'd built. On a warm June evening in 1905, 30 years after Ghost had found her dying, Sarah stood on the school's porch watching children play. Marcus came up behind her, his hair grey now, his movements slower but still strong. "Look at what we did," he said softly. Sarah leaned back against him. "Look at what that dog did. Ghost started all of this. You give that dog too much credit." "Never enough credit," she corrected. "He found me when I was dying. He brought you to me. He protected our children. He's the reason any of this exists." Marcus wrapped his arms around her. "I'm 58 years old. My back hurts most mornings. I can't ride as far or work as hard as I used to. But Sarah, I've never been happier than I am right now." "Me neither," she admitted. "I was dying in the snow at 22, thinking my life was over. Now I'm 52, and I feel like it's just beginning. Every day with you, every child we teach, every battle we win, it's all more than I ever dreamed possible." "What do you think 17-year-old Emma would say if she could see us now?" Marcus asked. It was the first time in years he'd mentioned his first wife's name without pain. Sarah considered. "I think she'd be proud of you, proud of us, proud that her death, tragic as it was, led to all this life." "I think so too," Marcus agreed. "I'll always love her. She made me believe I could be more than a violent, angry man. But you, Sarah, you made me become that better man. You made me want to be worthy of you." "You've always been worthy," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "From the moment you said I wasn't property, I was a person. That's when I knew I was safe with you." They kissed, soft and familiar. The kiss of two people who knew each other's every scar and secret, who'd built a life together from nothing but love and determination. Grandpa, Hope's daughter, 10 now, came running up. "Uncle Wolf is teaching us to make arrowheads. Come watch." They followed her down to where little Wolf, now 35 and a respected scout, was patiently showing a group of children how to knap flint. His own children, 3 of them, were among the students. "This is the way my grandfather taught me," he was saying. "And Marcus and Sarah made sure I could teach it to you. Never forget. Knowing where you come from makes you strong. Being proud of who you are makes you unbreakable." Sarah felt Marcus's hand tighten around hers. All of this, was what they'd fought for. Not just survival, but the right to define their own lives, to create family beyond blood, to teach truth instead of lies. That night, lying in bed in the home they'd shared for 30 years, Sarah said something she'd been thinking about. "When we're gone, and someday we will be, what do you think people will remember about us?" Marcus thought carefully. "I hope they remember that we chose love over hate, that we chose people over rules, that we built something good out of pain. But mostly, I hope they remember that it's never too late. I was a grieving widower. You were dying in the snow. We had every reason to give up. We didn't. And look what we created." "A family," Sarah said. "A family," Marcus agreed. "The truest kind, the one we chose." They fell asleep holding hands, as they always did. 2 people who'd nearly died, and instead learned how to truly live. The final years of their lives were gentle, spent watching grandchildren grow, seeing former students become teachers themselves, knowing they'd changed the world in small but important ways. The school thrived, surviving legal challenges and social pressure to become an institution that would outlast them both. Marcus died first in the spring of 1913 at 66 years old. He'd been checking the trap lines, which he still ran more from habit than necessity, when his heart simply stopped. Little Wolf found him sitting against a tree, his rifle across his lap, looking at peace. Sarah held his hand one last time and whispered, "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for our life together." She lived 3 more years, running the school, teaching children, telling stories about Marcus and Ghost, and the day that changed everything. When she died in 1916 at 63, she was surrounded by 4 children, 14 grandchildren, and more than 50 former students who'd come to say goodbye. They buried her next to Marcus on the hill overlooking their cabin, the same hill where Ghost was buried. The headstone was simple. Sarah Mitchell Webb, 1853-1916, found dying in the snow, chose to live instead, beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend. And beside it, Marcus Webb, 1847-1913. He saved her life, she saved his soul. Together, they saved the world. Years later, historians would write about the Webb School, about its innovative approach to education, about the famous students who'd learned there. They'd analyze the legal battles, the social impact, the way 2 ordinary people had quietly challenged the injustices of their time. But those who'd known them remembered something simpler, the way Marcus looked at Sarah like she was the sun itself. The way Sarah spoke of Marcus with fierce pride, the way they'd held hands even in old age. Still so clearly in love, it made young people believe in forever. And they remembered the story, already becoming legend, of a dying woman found by a mountain man's dog on a snowy winter day, and how that moment of mercy rippled out to change hundreds of lives. Ghost, they said, was the real hero. A dog who'd already saved Marcus once by leading him to Emma's broken body, who'd had every reason to avoid snow and tragedy, but who'd barked his way into history by refusing to abandon a stranger dying in the cold. The cabin still stands on that Montana mountain, preserved now as a historical site. The school building is there too, still used by the Blackfoot Nation to teach language and culture, and on the hill above them, 3 graves watch over the valley. Marcus, Sarah and Ghost, the mountain man, the survivor, and the dog who brought them together. Visitors come from all over to see the place where 2 broken people learned to be whole, where desperation turned to hope, where death gave way to life. And sometimes, on snowy winter days, people swear they hear a dog barking in the distance, as if Ghost still walks these mountains, still searching for lost souls who need saving, because that's what heroes do. They save people, even when they're just a dog who refused to leave a dying woman alone in the snow. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Marcus and Sarah's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.